In March 1943, German U-boats are on the attack. They sink 108 Allied vessels that month alone. Allied officials are desperate, and some fear a German victory in the Atlantic is imminent. If the Allies lose the Atlantic, Britain loses its lifeline, and maybe even the war. But by May 1943, it will be the U-boats limping home in defeat. So how, in just 2 months, did the U-boats go from hunters to hunting? From 1939, German U-boats threaten Allied shipping. Although German surface raiders do play a role, Admiral Kyle Donitz hopes that his submarines can wage a so-called tonnage war against British merchant vessels. This means sinking enough merchant shipping to either massively degrade British military capabilities, or better yet, from the German point of view, force London to surrender. At first, the Germans do have some success. Donitz calls summer 1940 the happy time, in which U-boats easily target mostly isolated merchantmen, sinking 471. When the U.S. joins the 1,000 to 1, this increases to about 60. The U-boat crews term this the second happy time, or even American shooting season. For British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, the Atlantic is the critical theater on which all others depend, and by late 1942, it is one of the few areas in which Germany remains decisively on the offensive. In November 1942, U-boats alone sink 768,000 gross tons of Allied shipping, their peak for the entire war. As a result, Churchill asks his allies for more assistance. He also lays down new guidelines for referring to the German submarine threat. Enemy submarines are to be called U-boats. The term submarine is to be reserved for Allied underwater vessels. U-boats are those dastardly villains who sink our ships, while submarines are those gallant and noble craft which sink theirs. At the Allied Casablanca Conference in January 1943, U.S. leaders agreed to prioritize the Atlantic and delay the invasion of France and Germany until 1944. Although some commanders accept reluctantly, others understand it is impossible to use the United Kingdom as a base for invasion with a lingering U-boat threat. But even with promises of more US support, issues remain. Across the Allied effort, there is a significant demand and internal competition for scant resources. Meanwhile, Donitz has more U-boats than ever. In 1939, Donitz had just 39 subs, but by early 1943, he has around 300 and more are being built. Then, when Grand Admiral Erich Raeder resigns as Navy Commander-in-Chief in January 1943, Hitler promotes Donitz to the top naval position. Hitler tells Donitz to maintain the pressure in the Atlantic, although the Grand Admiral remains realistic about the challenge in a radio broadcast. The harsh realities of the submarine war mean that even more difficult times lie ahead of us. With a submariner in command of the entire German Navy, the Allies also expect the U-boat menace to grow. One area of concern is the Mid-Atlantic Air Gap, a favored U-boat hunting ground known to Allied seamen as Torpedo Junction. By 1943, partly thanks to the massive expansion of the Royal Canadian Navy, Allied warships can provide end-to-end escort. But there are still too few and remain vulnerable without air support. Air bases in the UK, Iceland, Newfoundland, and Canada have been improving coverage, but there's still a gap of up to 1,000 kilometers off the Cape of Farewell. Allied commanders try to close it with escort carriers, including retrofitted civilian vessels or very long-range bombers like the B-24 Liberator. But until January 1943, British Coastal Command has only 6 VLR Liberators. The majority go to the bomber offensive against Germany or to the Pacific. Meanwhile, in December 1941, the German Navy's Beobachtungsdienst intelligence service cracked the British naval cipher WW2. By intercepting British communications, they organized group attacks on convoys. U-boats locate about 70% of convoys thanks to code breaking. Allied resources are also drained by the 1942 Operation Torch landings in North Africa and the Battle for Tunisia in early 1943. The Royal Navy diverts 125 destroyers and other escort ships to Torch, while fuel demands for African operations mean that North Atlantic convoys have less fuel to outmaneuver U-boats. The result is an increase in sinkings in early 1943. In March alone, German U-boats and surface ships sink 120 Allied ships globally, totaling 704,000 tons, 484,000 of which sinks in the Atlantic. This rapid increase in tonnage, sunk 74% over the previous month, is often seen as a major crisis. In March 1943, British memorandum claimed, "There is insufficient shipping to allow us to develop the offensives against the enemy which have been decided on. Every ship sunk makes the situation worse. We can no longer rely on evading the U-boat packs, and hence we shall have to fight the convoys through them." A December 1943 Allied report even goes so far as to suggest victory in the Atlantic, and therefore the entire war was threatened. More recent research, though, has questioned this crisis idea. The supposed March crisis mostly focuses on two convoys, which suffered disproportionate losses. 22 of 90 merchant vessels sunk. Overall, however, only 31% of March convoys are attacked, much lower than the 52% attacked in November 1942. In fact, in the first quarter of 1943, sinkings are lower than any 1942 quarter. The Allies are also building more ships than they're losing, with a net gain of 2 million gross tons by March 1943. Perhaps most significantly, there is nothing in German sources which portrays March as a moment of imminent victory. In fact, within 2 months, the U-boats withdraw from the Atlantic in defeat. Just as the March convoy battles are raging, the Allies meet in the Atlantic Convoy Conference to better pool resources and standardize procedures. The top priority is closing the mid-Atlantic air gap and taking the fight to the U-boats. The commander-in-chief of the Western approaches is optimistic. "I really have hopes now that we can turn from the defensive to another and better role, killing them." Early 1943 also sees several tactical, technological, and military developments all coming to fruition around the same time. Ultra-intelligence from the cracked German Enigma is the most well-known tool available to the Allies, but it was by no means the only one or even the most important. Ultra can provide a general location of most U-boats which are tracked by the men and women in London's submarine tracking room. Convoys reroute around them, which is an effective tactic. But ultra-intelligence is slow, and sometimes it takes up to 72 hours to decrypt German communications. There are also periodic blackouts, when Germans alter their settings, including almost all of 1942. And as the number of U-boats at sea increases, the likelihood of evading them decreases. Ultra is vital as a wider strategic tool, but cannot pinpoint U-boats that are preparing to attack. That's where other technology comes in. By early 1943, more Allied escorts are equipped with better sonar and radar equipment. Underwater AS-DIC sonar can listen for submerged U-boats, gauging range and bearing. Not only does this reveal approaching U-boats, but allows for more accurate use of anti-submarine weapons, like the Hedgehog and depth charges. Meanwhile, ships and aircraft equipped with the new 10 cm radar can detect U-boats on the surface. None of these tools are perfect, but when combined with others, they create a near impenetrable network of defenses. The first indication of a U-boat attack would be from the Aztec people, who would pick up a contact. You could hear these pings, and the difference between the ping and the pong is the distance, how far the submarine is away. When they think they're right over the top of the submarine, the order is fire. That means the depth charges go. A colossal volume of water would come up. It was almost like lightning going across the water. In daytime, it's a fantastic thing to see. German submariner Anton Staller, aboard U-188, is on the receiving end of a depth charge attack in March 1943. Alarm bells shrilled loudly. Destroyer on the starboard bow, range about 5,000 meters. A quick glance at the manometer showed me that we were at 100 meters. At the same instant, for the first time, I heard ahead of us the roar of exploding depth charges. Now I discovered how appallingly loud these sounded underwater. Though fearful, I concentrated on my hydrophone, wondering if I would ever hear anything again in my life. Another important Allied development is high-frequency direction finding, known as FDF or HFD. This can detect German U-boat radio communications out to 25 kilometers, close enough to pursue an attack. It greatly outranges surface radar and helps allow escorts to be more proactive. The technology existed since 1942, but in 1943 it's much more available, with at least 2 HDF-equipped ships per convoy. With this comes more powerful anti-submarine weapons and better organization. Previously, 6 escorts were considered adequate to protect 24 merchantmen, but civilian experts led by Professor P.M.S. Blackett find that 8 escorts can protect 48 merchant ships just as effectively. This combines smaller convoys into larger ones and frees up escorts, which can become mobile support groups assisting specific convoys that have fallen under attack. And finally, there are more very long-range bombers and escort carriers. By May, Coastal Command has 49 VLR bombers, up from 17 in February. Although dwarfed by the hundreds of bombers attacking German industry, this number is enough to close the air gap. Aircraft like B-24 Liberators, Whitley bombers, and Sunderland and Catalina flying boats become vital submarine killers, quickly accounting for around half of U-boat losses. The combination of new tools and tactics is devastating to the U-boat fleet. In April, the battle balances out, as the Allies lose 39 merchantmen, but sink 15 U-boats. May 1943 is the decisive month, especially the voyage of convoys. Heading to Liverpool from Halifax, Nova Scotia. The convoy has 37 merchantmen and 8 escorts, several equipped with HFD and new 10 cm radar. German naval intelligence identifies the convoy and gathers up to 25 U-boats and 3 wolf packs to attack. Donau 1 and 2 approach from southeast, while Wolfpack Ila is already in the area. The plan is to attack the convoy in the air gap, but British ultra-intelligence is already aware of this. However, a system failure means the information is not passed to the escort commander. Even so, when the attack opens on May 18th, the escorts proactively sweep for the U-boats and spoil their attacks, while the convoy also makes evasive turns. Soon the battle moves within the range of approaching Allied aircraft, which hound the U-boats and force them to submerge. By May 21st, U-boat command abandons the attack. U-boat command abandons another with no losses. On board one of the sunken U-boats, U-954, is Admiral Donitz's youngest son Paul, who dies with the rest of his crew. The SK-130 battle is the pinnacle of a terrible month for the Kriegsmarine. in which they lose a total of 41 U-boats, almost 25% of those that are operational. Kapitän Lieutenant Peter Erich Kramer at U-boat staff headquarters later recalls, "This May situation was quite out of hand. As I was soon to learn, the number of boats that failed to return from patrol reached more than one a day. There was talk of Black May." On May 24th, Dönitz orders his U-boats to withdraw from the Atlantic until better equipment and countermeasures are available. So why did things go so wrong so fast for the U-boats? Allied developments are one factor, but there were also German weaknesses. Firstly, the Germans had poor intelligence on Allied capabilities, especially Huff-Duff radar and Enigma decryption. As a result, submariners didn't know how to avoid or compensate for them. Secondly, Dönitz's top-down approach required constant radio reports, especially before an attack. This gave British Ultra and Huff-Duff detection more chances of locating them. During the SE-130 battle, there were 104 Huff-Duff reports, allowing the Allies to pinpoint the U-boats. Thirdly, the Kriegsmarine lacked reliable air cover. Dönitz demanded more from Hermann Göring's Luftwaffe, but Göring resisted, diverting resources away from his own interests. The increase in U-boat numbers also didn't mean a proportionate increase in sinkings, although the sheer number of active U-boats still worried the Allies. By April 1943, the average kill per U-boat at sea had sunk to 2,000 tons. This might be interesting as a sort of sporting score, but the number of U-boats operating had so greatly increased that it was of little significance in solving the problem. When Daniel Boone, who shot 50 bears a year, was replaced by 50 hunters who averaged one each, the Bears saw no occasion to celebrate the decline in human marksmanship, and individual U-boat performance and crew experience were dropping quickly. In 1940, U-boat commanders had an average 2 years experience, but in 1943, this was only 8 months. Most U-boat captains killed in May 1943 had only 1 or 2 patrols to their name. In 1940, 2% of U-boat captains were responsible for 30% of sinkings. All these so-called aces had entered the Kriegsmarine before 1935. But by 1943, the veterans of the early war were gone. Roughly 850 U-boats, about 75% of the total built and crewed during the war, would never damage an Allied merchantman. In November 1940, the average tonnage sunk per U-boat per day was 430 tons. In January 1943, though it was just 65. From 1939 to early 1943, the Atlantic is the only theater in which Germany successfully maintained the offensive. But now even there, they are in retreat. Dönitz's withdrawal is not meant to be permanent, though. He fast-tracks new U-boat developments and shifts back to smaller group tactics, but the U-boat wolf packs will never make a meaningful return. Instead, the Atlantic becomes the logistical highway for the Allied invasion of Europe. 2 years after Black May for the German U-boat fleet, Admiral Dönitz becomes head of state and supreme commander of the armed forces of Nazi Germany. After that is Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels commit suicide in the Reich Chancellery bunker as the Red Army is closing in on the city center during the climax of the Battle of Berlin. If you're interested in this battle, we produced the most detailed documentary about it. 16 Days in Berlin follows the Battle of Berlin day by day in 18 episodes and runs for 4.5 hours, featuring detailed maps and animations, original combat footage, interviews with experts like David Willey from the Tank Museum and Ian from Forgotten Weapons. We couldn't upload this uncompromising look at the carnage of the Second World War on YouTube, though. It would get demonetized immediately. So where can you watch 16 Days in Berlin? On Nebula, a streaming service we're building together with other creators, and where we don't have to worry about advertising guidelines like on YouTube. At WW2.com/real-time history, you can sign up for just $30 a year and get access to 16 Days in Berlin, our other Nebula original series, Rhineland 45 and Red Atoms, and all our other videos ad-free and earlier than on YouTube. And that's not all. Apart from watching other creators' original documentaries like the Battle of Britain series from Real Engineering. Your Nebula subscription also includes classes where you can learn useful skills directly from Nebula creators. In our newest class, I take you through the entire production process of a real-time history video and give a glimpse behind the scenes of what it takes to produce a great history documentary. Again, that's Nebula TV/real-time history for just $30 a year and supporting us here at Real-Time History directly. As usual, you can find all the sources for this video in the video description below. If you're watching this video on Nebula or Patreon, thank you so much for the support. If you want to learn more about two battles directly influenced by the turning tide in the Atlantic in 1943, check out our videos about Tunisia and Sicily. I'm Jesse Alexander, and this is a production of Real-Time History, the only history channel still raving to the 1992 techno version of the Das Boot title theme. It was a thing in Germany. Look it up.